David, my son, told me he hoped I would die of hunger because he had taken $4.7 million from my late wife's estate. He didn't realize that I had the original paperwork in my safe that proved he had forged his mother's signature. I decided not to see him again after he did something so cruel. Before we go any further, please sign up for William's Revenge Stories. Make sure you get alerts because we upload new content every day. If you like it, please tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Alan Miller is my name. For 42 years, until 6 months ago, I knew my son David. I am 68 years old. I thought I had raised a man who was honest, worked hard, and cared about the values that his mother Emily and I taught him. I was so incorrect. It all started on March 15, 2024, 8 months after my wife Emily passed away. That day, David came to my house in a good part of Chicago with a smile that I now know was a predator's. It changed my life for good. His remarks came from the couch where Emily used to read her love stories. He continued, "Dad, we need to talk about what Mom left behind." His statement seemed quite official, like he had rehearsed them. That's when I should have figured it out. David took a file box out of his bag and put it on the couch table. We reviewed all the papers with my lawyer, and it turns out that Mom made everything explicit in her will. The $4.7 million saved, the mansion on the lake, and the stock in the company. It's all mine. For a moment, everything paused. We had a lot of talks regarding our wills. She was usually extremely clear. She wanted me to take all she owned. After I died, David would get the money. That choice made logical. Because I was elderly and would need the money for my last few years. I said to David, "That can't be right," and a strange shudder ran down my spine. "When I die, your mom and I agreed that she would get my money and you would get my possessions." David's expression transformed right away. The worried son's mask slipped off, and what I saw made my blood run cold. "Dad, don't get lost as you become older. This is the paperwork that Mom signed and the notary checked out. Michael Johnson, everything is okay." With shaky hands, I grasped the documents. Yes, Emily's name was up there, and it looked legitimate. She gave David all of her money. But something was off. I knew my wife's writing like the back of my hand after 45 years of marriage. It looked like her signature, but there was something wrong with it. I murmured in a quiet voice, "I need time to think about this." The room seemed to be spinning around me. "There's no reason to think about it. Dad, I've already begun all the legal formalities. The money has already been put in my account. And the lake house, too." David stood up and pressed his shirt with a kind of pride I had never seen in him before. "Think of this as a payment on your fortune. In the end, everything would have worked out for me." That's when I uttered something that would never happen again in our relationship. "If this is true, David, I will do what your mother says. If I find out that these papers are wrong, there will be very terrible consequences." He laughed. A chilly, planned laugh that hurt me like a dagger. The old man who can't even remember where he put his car keys is to blame. "Dad, you need to confront the facts. Mom knew that I would be better with her money and smarter than you. David, your mother cared for me. She would never have done this if she hadn't asked me first. Did you adore her?" David came up to me. For the first time ever, I was terrified of my son. "If you really loved her, you would have accepted her last desires instead of criticizing her choice." David grinned as he left that night, and I sat in the study that I had shared with Emily for many years. I could almost hear her gentle voice saying, "Alan, something is wrong," as her photos looked at me from every aspect. David began to make substantial changes in his life over the next few days. Out of nowhere, he got a new BMW 7 Series. He rented a nice apartment in the city center and posted images on social media of himself eating at the most costly restaurants in the city. Every time I saw it, it shattered my heart a bit more. It wasn't about the money, it was about getting to know my son better. David returned to see me again 3 weeks later, on April 8th. That conversation altered everything for me. This time he didn't just come to inform me. He came to make fun of me. "Dad, I've been thinking about your situation," he remarked as he looked at the family photos like they were old clothes at a thrift store. "I think you should think about moving to an area that is better for your age and your new financial condition. David, here is where I live. I used to live here with your mom. We remember everything that happens here. Dad, Memories don't pay the bills. David paused for a long time, savoring every word he was about to utter. And now that you only depend on your pension, he remarked. Let's just say that it will be challenging to keep this enormous mansion in good order. That's when something inside me broke. I didn't feel melancholy like I had in weeks. Instead, I felt a cold, premeditated rage that I had never felt before. I slowly stood up from my chair and asked David, "You know what?" He laughed at my sarcasm and said, "Your mother would be so proud to see what you've become." "Oh, I get it now. I know she would be. She was the one who decided to give me everything." I looked him in the eye and responded, "Yes. She would have wanted it for sure." That night, David was enjoying his good luck at a club in the city. I made a choice that would affect our lives forever. When I got to my study, I opened the safe that Emily and I had put there years ago. It was safe and well organized, and it had all of our most critical paperwork inside. We keep marriage and birth certificates, property titles, and first wills safe. Emily signed and dated her first will only 6 months before she died. I checked it out to see if it matched the paperwork David had given me. Anyone who had seen Emily's name 1,000 times could detect the difference. The way some letters are slanted and how hard the pen is pressed, small things that only a husband of 45 years would notice. David stole my money by using a phony name that belonged to his dead mother. At that time, I had the proof that the conflict had started. My youngster had no concept what was going to happen next. I worked hard on an inquiry for the following 3 days. It was so detailed that even Emily, who always valued my attention to detail, would have been happy. I laid all of the papers on the dining room table. On one side was David's false will and on the other side were the real ones. Once you knew what to look for, the difference was awful. Emily signed her genuine will on September 22, 2023. Which was just 2 months before she found out she had pancreatic cancer. Her handwriting was just as strong as it always is. Emily's E was tilted to the right like it always is, and Miller's M ended with the tiny flourish she had been doing since she was a toddler in David's fake. They imitated those minor details, but not exactly. The pen pressure wasn't always the same when I tried to imitate a model, which made it look like I was tracing each letter slowly. Even more telling is that when Emily signed crucial papers, she always wrote out the complete month of September. The false paper said September 2023 on it, but the most convincing proof came from the bank records I kept in my own filing box. On November 14, 2023, she died. David indicated that his will was dated December 5, 2023. My son wrote a bogus letter that indicated it was from 3 weeks after his mother died. That concept hit me like a ton of bricks. Not only did he forge my signature, but he also made up a date that couldn't have happened, knowing that I would be too upset to investigate the facts. For 42 years, I thought my son could control me. I started to work on David's plan on April 11, 2017, while he was uploading photographs of his new Rolex Submariner on Instagram. I went over every conversation we had in the months before Emily died, every time he went to the hospital, and every time he was alone with the family files. I remember very clearly the day Emily fell into a coma. The 8th of November. David made me stay at the hospital that night while he went home to sleep. "Dad, you've been here every day for 5 days. Eat some hot food and then take a shower at home. I will be staying with my mom." I assumed it was because I wanted to honor my parents at first. I now knew that it was just using me. David probably took images of all of our key papers that night, while his mother was probably dying. He could access all of our account information, including our seals and signatures. David went back home on Tuesday, April 14th, exactly 1 month after his initial successful stay. This time, he was even more full of himself. He gazed at the furniture and paintings in the house as if he already owned it. Over the years, Emily and I have gathered various things. As he glanced at the grand piano Emily played every Sunday morning, he said, "Dad, I've been thinking about what will happen to this property. It's obvious that a 4,000 square foot house for one person is a waste of money and space. This place means a lot to you, David. Sentimental value doesn't make money." He sat down on the piano bench and played a few keys that didn't sound good together. I spoke with a few real estate agents. "We could sell this house for at least $800,000 right now." "Could we?" "Yes, I could. In a technical sense, according to Mom's wishes. Only I can get the family property." David used more force than he needed to close the piano lid, but I'm being nice. I'd be pleased to share the money with you, Dad. Put up $100,000 for when you were elderly. You have more than most people your age. I was in charge of that conversation the whole time. I really wanted to call him out for being a thief straight away, show him the real papers, and make him face the truth. But starting a business from scratch for 45 years taught me how crucial it is to be patient in a planned way. I said quietly, "That's an interesting idea. I need to think about it." "Dad, there's not a lot to think about. It's simple to view the numbers." David got up and went to the window that looked out over Emily's rose garden. "It's also not safe for you to live alone in such a vast house at your age. If you fall or have heart problems, you might not be seen for days." The way he said made me think he was threatening me. He was not just figuring out how much money I had, but also how weak I was. I called Michael Johnson, the lawyer who had been handling our legal issues for more than 20 years, that night after he departed. Before we got married, Evan and Michael were buddies. His dad had been the Miller family's lawyer for a long time. Michael said, "Alan, good to hear from you. I always felt comfortable when he spoke. How have things been for you since Emily?" "Michael, I need to ask you a very critical question about Emily's will." There was a short pause. "Of course. Is there a problem with the instructions?" David presented me Emily's will, which says that she wants him to get all of her money. The date is December 20,123. There was so much silence that I thought the call had ended. Michael eventually said something. His voice sounded worried and confused at the same time. "You can't do that, Alan. At September 2023, Emily wrote her last will at my office. You are the only person who can get her things, and that paper says so. Emily made that very apparent. Are you sure that I have the originals in my safe?" Emily wanted everything written down, in addition to the video records of the signing, because she was sick. She wanted to make sure that the legislation would be clear once she was gone. That proof was the final thing that kept me and David together. He had done more than just make false papers. He wrote a will that didn't exist. I knew that losing Emily had made me vulnerable to emotional attacks. I maintained working on my investigation for the next 3 days, just like an investigator would. I checked over David's bank records from the last 6 months. I could view the paperwork because I co-signed for his first place years ago. The way he spent his money demonstrated how he meant to deceive people. David called a few estate law firms in November, soon after Emily died. In December, he paid a document specialist. I knew their names since I had read about scams in the news. In January 2024, David started selling off his minor assets, as if he were preparing ready for a major cash windfall. He spoke with financial advisors in February about how to deal with the huge gift that was on its way. It was all planned out and done in a cold way that made it hard for me to connect with the son I had raised, the 12-year-old boy I had comforted when he broke his leg, and the boy who grieved in my arms the day Emily got her diagnosis. On April 20th, while I was organizing all the evidence into different files, I got a call that almost gave me a heart attack. "Dad," David's voice sounded strange. He was probably inebriated. "You should know something crucial." "David, what is it?" "Last night at the city casino, I lost $120,000. My heart stopped." "What did you say?" "Calm down, Dad. I have over $4 million. $120,000 isn't a lot of money." His chuckle sounded insane and out of control. "What's the best part? The money my mom gave me is great to spend. She frequently encouraged people to be careful with their money. But now that it's mine, I can do whatever I want. Please go home, David. We can discuss about this." "What do you want to talk about?" "About how your mom liked me more than you? About how she ultimately realized out who was better at managing the family's money." His voice turned harsh and toxic. "Dad, face it. Mom always knew I was smarter than you," she remarked. He hung up before I could say anything. That night, while I listened to the rain hit the windows of the house Emily and I shared, I made up my mind. David didn't merely grab the money from people who owed him money. It was coming apart because he was hurting himself so much. Emily's heart would have broken. My youngster needed to learn what happens when he doesn't listen to his dad. On Monday, April 21st, I felt as clear as glass, which I hadn't felt in months. After weeks of sorrow and confusion, I finally realized what I wanted to do: formally established that my son had done a lot of really horrible things to destroy my mother's memory and me. I called James Bryan at 9 a.m. I had met him years ago when we disagreed over business. He is a lawyer who works in both criminal and civil law. James was known for being very strict about document theft, and his experience with situations like mine made him the best person for the job. I said hello to James and then informed him, I need your professional help with a very sensitive issue. It has to do with forgery of wills, financial frauds, and theft of property. Those are some extremely significant things. Alan, are you sure about what you're saying? I have proof that can't be contested with. Today is a fantastic day to get together. After 2 hours, I was seated in James's office in the finance sector, which was full with bookcases with law codes and court cases. I brought all the paperwork, including originals, copies, bank records, and a comprehensive timeline of events. They were all well organized in boxes with clear labels. James glanced at each piece of paper with the same intensity as a surgeon. He looked over each page, and his face became more serious. When he reached to the place where he compared Emily's real signature to the bogus ones, he let out a small whistle. This is a textbook case of aggravated document forgery, he stated in a hushed voice as he inspected more closely through a magnifying glass. You can see the difference in stroke pressure even if you don't have an expert undertake a detailed analysis. What are our legal options? Strike from more than one side. James sat back in his chair and shot them one by one. If you forge a public document, you could go to jail for 6 months to 3 years. Due of the family links and the sum, which could put someone in jail for 1 to 6 years. He pretended to be the true owner and got the money back, which is how he stole someone's identity. That's the neat part. It is against the law to send money based on phony papers that were used to collect the money because the money was stolen. We can ask that any accounts holding that money be frozen straight away. I felt my heart start to race. I hadn't felt like I could do anything to seek justice in weeks. James said, we will need an official handwriting expert. I know the best investigative scientist in the country who can do this kind of work. Edward Vance, whose true name is Edward Vance, has been a witness in some very public trials for the past 15 years. How long will it take for everything? I can file the complaint tomorrow morning to acquire the freeze measures as a safety measure. The Chicago courts are speedy and good at handling cases of family money theft. Edward can get some early results from the handwriting analysis in 72 hours. That afternoon, while James worked on the legal papers, I finally did something I had been putting off for a long time. I called all the banks where Emily and I had joint accounts to tell them about the hoax. Emily had her main account at Main Street Bank since she was 25 years old, therefore this was her first call there. Megan Lewis, the office manager, knew Emily because she had come in many times over the years. Mr. Miller, I'm so sorry for your loss, Megan remarked with sincere sorrow. Emily was one of our most loyal customers. Megan, how can I help you? I assume someone used bogus paperwork to get to Emily's money, so I need to report fraud in her accounts. Megan's voice quickly became professional and alert. Mr. Miller, that is really serious. Please come to the branch straight away. This needs to be reported to the bank in writing. Since November, Megan looked at everything that had happened in Emily's accounts. We found something that was far worse than I feared it would be. David didn't only send the money. He used bogus paperwork to get into a bank account I didn't know about, where Emily had kept another $800,000 in government bonds. Megan printed out the papers that Mr. Miller needed and said, our records show that these transfers were made by showing a power of attorney that supposedly gave David Miller full control over all of Mrs. Miller's accounts. Can you quickly freeze any account where these funds have been put once we have the court order? Yes. But I can tell you that we've uncovered 3 distinct accounts that have received substantial payments in the last few months. Edward Vance, a forensic specialist, came to my residence on Tuesday, April 22nd, to look into the matter. He was quite careful in the 50 seconds he had. He had special glasses that made things look bigger and a luggage full of spy movie-like gear. He put his things on my dining room table and said, Mr. Miller, I've looked over the papers your lawyer sent me. The question sheets and the real writing samples are very different from each other. Edward spent the next 3 hours carefully looking at each piece of paper. He utilized ultraviolet light to look at the ink, special tools to assess the stroke pressure, and authentic examples of Emily's writing that I gave him to compare each letter to. Finally, he remarked, "The evidence is clear. Someone tried to imitate your wife's handwriting with these signals, but they didn't have the muscle memory that comes from writing in a certain way for decades. Forensic experts can easily see the alterations, but most people wouldn't be able to tell the difference. How strong is this proof in court that no one can argue with? In the last 30 years, I've been a witness in situations like this, and I've never seen scams this apparent. The guy who did this had no idea how much better handwriting analysis has gotten in the last few years." On April 23, James filed the criminal case against David in the Central Courthouse. The complaint named all the offenses we knew about, using handwriting analysis, bank records, and witness statements as proof. That afternoon, I got a call that made me feel happy for the first time in months. "Hey, Mr. Miller. This is Judge Catherine Hayes from the 12th Court. We have read your report and the evidence you supplied. Because the claims are so serious and the early proof is so strong, we are taking precautions immediately away." What does that mean? This means that tomorrow morning we will start taking over all the bank accounts where the stolen money is. The things that were bought with that money will also be frozen. That night, I made dinner in the kitchen where Emily used to try out new dishes. I hadn't felt like I was doing the right thing by remembering her in months. I wouldn't let our son's selfishness and betrayal ruin her memory. At 8 a.m. on Thursday, April 24, court agents arrived at 3 different places at the same time. David's luxurious apartment, the BMW store where he parked his new automobile, and the Main Street bank offices where he maintained his main accounts. James contacted me every minute to let me know what was going on, even though I wasn't there for any of these sessions. "Alan, the safety measures were put in place and worked flawlessly." He told me at 10 a.m. David's accounts have all been frozen. The BMW was taken, and the owner was told that the money used to pay for the flat and the deposit didn't belong to him. Also, does David know what's going on? Not yet. There was no need for the spies to talk to him personally. He'll discover out when he tries to use his credit cards or get into his accounts. I was worried about what would happen the rest of the day. I knew David's world, which was constructed on lies and bogus papers, was going to fall apart soon. And then I would finally know what kind of person the man I had reared for 42 years actually was. Emily had always liked how things were going to start moving quickly and fairly in the judicial system. On Friday, April 25, I began my secret plan to pull apart the lavish life David had established with the money his mother had stolen. While he was sleeping, I was already doing the first stage of my plan. He was probably really inebriated since he had spent too much money at the casinos downtown the night before. At about 7 a.m., I called the high-end rental organization that managed David's fancy apartment. I spoke with Robert Stone, the owner, who was a businessman who got a few houses in the downtown area. "Hello, Mr. Stone. I am Alan Miller. In your building, David Miller lives in room 312. David Miller is his name, and I am his father." "Yes, that's right. I know your son, and he's a very attractive young man. How can I help? I hate to admit this, but my kid has been using money he earned illegally to pay the rent. I have a court ruling that shows that all the money used for the deposit and the recurring installments originated from a bank account that was open with bogus documents." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Robert was an experienced businessman who realized straight away how what I was saying would change the law. "Mr. Miller, this is really essential. What do I need to do?" "The lease contract has to stop right once because the cash came from an unauthorized source. According to state legislation, any deal made with money from criminal activity is not valid." I acquired proof that David's agreement had been canceled after 2 hours. He had 24 hours to leave the apartment, and the owner would keep the $6,000 security deposit as reimbursement for the problems it caused. The second number I phoned was the one on the main road where David bought his 7 Series for $58,000. Anthony Reed, the sales manager, remembered everything about the deal accurately since David paid in cash, which is not common for cars that cost that much. After introducing myself, I told Mr. Reed that the money my son used to buy the car was stolen. The court has proof that the money was made by lying on official documents. This is really hard to get. Mr. Miller, your kid already has the car in his name. I understand what's going on, but the law is clear. You can take back everything you acquired with unlawful money and give it back to the person who owns it. My lawyer can send you all the papers if you need them. Anthony was ready to help as soon as he understood how serious the legal problem was. That same afternoon, the BMW was removed from the underground parking lot of David's building. He would try to use it, but a court order had taken it away. But the best thing I did that day was call all of David's banks and ask them where his money was. For years, I was his financial guarantor, which meant I could see how he usually used his bank accounts. I called the City Trust Bank first. After getting the gift, David opened a premium account there. Frank Cole, the office manager, told me about my lengthy history of good credit. "Frank, I need to tell you about a theft case that has to do with the money my son David Miller has." "That would be Alan. How do we communicate about fraud?" "My kid got the money he put into his account with some bogus paperwork. A court judgment specifies that any account that was funded with these funds must be frozen right away." Frank glanced at David's account while we were on the phone to see what had changed. He couldn't believe what he found out. "Your son has moved more than $5 million through this store in the last 3 months. He has sent money to accounts in Switzerland, bought big CDs, and even put money into cryptocurrency." "Forks of cash?" "Yes. He acquired Bitcoin and Ethereum for roughly $800,000. He has also wired money to internet casinos and other places where you can make risky investments." Hearing this hit me like a blow in the stomach. David didn't only steal money from his mom. He was wasting it in ways that Emily would never have dreamt of. Every dollar she lost in gambling and betting on the stock market was another blow to her memory. "Frank, please cease all of these things right now. I also require a complete record of every trade that has taken place since November 2023. By 3 o'clock Main Street Bank and other banks called me with similar news. David's accounts had been stopped. They had frozen a total of $6.2 million in different financial assets. But the worst thing I had planned to do to David that day was to cancel all the credit cards I had promised him for years. David possessed 4 high-end cards that could hold up to $150,000 each. Everything is backed by stuff I possess. I called each company that supplied the cards, explained them what was going on legally, and requested them to deactivate the cards immediately now since the user had been using them in a way that wasn't lawful. David had no means to pay electronically before 6 p.m. There was an unusual lack of sound on Saturday, April 26th. David still hadn't tried to get in touch with me, which meant he still didn't know how horrible things were for him. He probably went to a posh club on Friday night, sure that all of his cards and accounts were still operating. I worked on the last phase of my plan that day, which was to pull David out of all of my insurance policies and wills. To do this, they had to carefully read all of the papers that said he was the beneficiary. For instance, my main will, which I wrote in 2020, said that David would get all of my money and property when I died. He also had the right to my $900,000 life insurance policy and the pension plan from my job, which I had worked for 40 years. I called Patrick Sims, an agent I trust, to set up an important appointment for the next Monday. Patrick had known Emily for a long time and would have understood why I was making such major adjustments. I thought about all the effort I had done in just 3 days as I was at Sunday service at St. James Cathedral when Emily and I got married there on April 27th. David quickly learned that his luxurious apartment's lease had been broken, his BMW had been taken, his bank accounts had been stopped, and his credit cards had been revoked. The most important thing is that he would find out that all of this happened because I discovered him cheating and took him to court. James called me in the afternoon of that day with news that made my pulse race. "Alan, I have something very essential to tell you." This morning, David utilized the mobile app to try to get into his main City Trust account. He saw a message on the screen. A court injunction temporarily limits the account. He may have called the bank. Yes, but today is Sunday, so the office is closed. He could only talk to basic customer service, which can't tell him about court rulings. What is his current position? According to our sources, he spent the night at the Villamana Hotel. The owner changed the locks on his flat this morning, so he couldn't get back in. I was thrilled and sad at the same time when I thought of David sleeping in a nice hotel. He didn't realize that the next day he would wake up in a whole new world. For 42 years, he was my son. He had become a con artist and taken from his own dead mother. David eventually learned what would happen if he didn't respect his father on Monday, April 28th. And I would be ready for all of his desperate calls, all of his tricks to get me to forgive him, and all of his pleas for forgiveness. Justice proceeded slowly, but it was always right, which Emily would have liked. The best thing was that David didn't know the war had started and he was already losing. I got at Patrick Sims's notary office in the City Park District on Monday, April 28, at 9 a.m. sharp. I was able to make the biggest adjustments a father can, shutting off his son from all of his money and property, thanks to all the papers I provided. When I went to Patrick's office, he treated me with the respect that the situation called for. He was 63 years old and had been handling my family's legal problems for over 20 years. He wrote Emily's will, signed off on the purchase of our house, and was there for all the big events in our lives. He arranged the documents on his mahogany desk and continued, "Alan, I've read what you sent me about what happened with David. In my 40 years as a lawyer, I have rarely encountered such a vicious and deliberate case of family betrayal. Patrick, I want you to know that I'm not doing this to get back at you. Because it's the correct thing to do, I'm doing it. He shouldn't get a penny from my estate since he can exploit his dead mother's name to take her money." Patrick nodded his head in agreement. "I completely understand why you're doing what you're doing. Let's go ahead and make the revisions to the testimony." The process was incredibly careful and complete. We read through my current will line by line and wrote down every time David was designated as a beneficiary. It made me sad to see how many times I had to set extra regulations to keep him safe and healthy in the future. This is the most essential sentence if you remember what Patrick said. This person is the only person who will inherit all of my property, rights, and deeds. I gave this to my son David Miller so that he would remember his mother and carry on the family's values that have been passed down for centuries. The words I penned 4 years ago with a lot of affection for my father today sound like a cruel joke from fate. I told Patrick, I want that clause to be taken out and replaced completely. Instead, I want to leave a gift to a charity that really honors Emily's legacy. In the next 2 hours, we wrote a brand new will. 3 charity that Emily had given money to when she was alive would get my complete estate, which is valued roughly $3.2 million. The American Cancer Society, the American Heart Association, and Chicago Charities are some of these groups. I informed Patrick, who was typing out my directives, I also want to include a specific clause about David. I wanted it to be clear that David Miller can't get any money from the estate because he lied to the court about taking money from the family estate. Alan, that is a really harsh phrase. It will be very hard for David to officially oppose the will once he is included. That's just what I need. I updated my life insurance policy, which was the second half of my plan, while Patrick finalized the paperwork. I called State Life Insurance since I had a $900,000 contract with them for 20 years. Mr. Miller, my policy manager Amanda Jenkins had been in charge of my account from the beginning and knew everything about my family. When I informed her what I intended to do, she said that changing the beneficiary of such a significant policy required special paperwork. Are you sure you want your son to be the only one who gets the money? Amanda, I'm more sure of this than I've ever been of anything else. I want this money to go to the Emily Miller Foundation for Cancer Research. It will be named after your wife and will be used to battle the cancer that killed her. This week, I will start this groundwork. Remembering her is the correct thing to do. It took 40 minutes to conclude the process of changing the recipient. When I died, David was supposed to collect $900,000, but suddenly he was getting nothing. The nicest thing was that he wouldn't know until it was too late to change his mind. At 2 p.m. I switched my bank's pension plan for my firm. I had saved up $600,000 for my retirement over the course of 40 years of employment. Money that was supposed to make David richer. My financial advisor, Thomas Bell, went over all of my options for relocating the money with me. Mr. Miller, you can pick new people to get the money, but you can also change the plan so that it becomes a life income that terminates when you die, he said. This manner, no one will be able to get that money after you die. The second option sounds wonderful. I don't want any of the money I've made over the last 40 years to go to someone who doesn't deserve it. While we were filling out the forms, I saw David's first clue that he was starting to get what was going on. I got a text message on my phone that made me feel cold all the way through. Dad, something weird is happening with my bank accounts. Can I talk? I didn't answer immediately away. I had been looking forward to this moment for days, and I wanted David to feel the full fear of not understanding what was going on. He should have suffered at least some of the sorrow I felt when I found out he had betrayed me. The last substantial adjustment I made to my plan was to change the powers of attorney at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. For a long time, David had some limited power to help me with some of my money problems. Emily and I did something to be safe because we believed I would get old soon. We officially took away all of David's authority over my business at Patrick's notary office. We also gave my lawyer, James Bryant, new powers so that he could handle all of my business if I ever lost the ability to do so. David no longer has any formal influence over your money. Patrick said that if he tried to utilize any of the previous documents after everything was signed, he would be committing another usurpation felony. When I left the public office at sunset, I had copies of all the papers that had just impacted David's financial future in a huge way in just 8 hours. He was no longer in my will, my life insurance, my pension plan, or any other legal control I had over my decisions. David sent me 6 more texts on my phone in the afternoon. The last one was the most crucial. I need to talk to you right now, Dad. They said that there is a problem with my account. What do you know? Please answer, Dad. Something really horrible is happening. What's wrong with you? I'm afraid. I don't know why, Dad, but someone stole my credit cards. Please call me. Please help me. The writings made it clear to me what I imagined would happen. David began to understand that his great life was coming to an end, but he still hadn't connected what was happening to the awful things he had done. That night, I had dinner alone in the kitchen where Emily used to cook for me. I thought about what I had done. In less than a week, I had built a strong case against David in court, gotten back the stolen money, stopped him from collecting any more money, and amended my will so that he would never get anything from it again. But I knew things would become worse. David would soon find out that I knew he was lying, and I would have to have the worst conversation of my life. Telling my son that he had broken our connection for good and that he would have to deal with the consequences of violating his mother's memory. The phone rang again around 9 p.m. this time. I decided to answer. David had to start to realize how horrible what he had done was and what would happen to him because of it. The part of my answer where I didn't say anything was done. This is when the conflict started. Hello there. I answered the phone on purpose in a calm way that was different from how anxious David's texts had made me feel all day. Thank God you answered, Dad. David's voice sounded tight and almost like he was begging. You have to let me know what's going on. My accounts are all acting really strange. There is something weird. David, please tell me all about the problems you're having. This morning, when I went to pay for breakfast at the hotel, it didn't work. I tried the other 3 cards and they all got turned down also. I felt there was something wrong with the system at first. I waited for the silence to last long enough for David to feel strange. What else happened? What did the bank say regarding my main account when I got there? Limited for a short time by a court order. What do you know about this? Dad, I'm starting to think that someone wants to hurt me. His remarks were like a slap of sarcasm. David now feared that someone was out to get him because he had forged documents to take his dead mother's money. David, have you thought about the possibility that you or I done something that caused these problems? Dad, I don't understand what you're saying. I didn't do anything wrong. I've told you everything you need to know about Mom's money. Completely honest and upfront. The way I spoke things changed. Are you really sure about that? I could hear David breathing heavily on the other end of the line. He didn't know why, but his faith was starting to fade. I don't know what you mean, Dad, but I need your help right now. I can't get to my money. Because I wasn't paying my rent on time, I was forced out of my apartment. Now my car is parked in the basement. Someone seems to have set out to wreck my life overnight, and you have no idea who it is. That's why I'm getting in touch with you. I assumed you might have experienced the same troubles as me or know someone who could assist me sort this out. It was alarming how naive David was. He hoped I would run to save him when the police eventually caught up with him after months of squandering the stolen money carelessly, making fun of me in public, and hoping I would die of hunger. Before I can help you, David, please tell me something really vital. Are you sure that all the papers that have to do with your mother's present are true and correct? There was no talking for over 20 seconds. David was probably sitting in a hotel lounge on the other end, coming to realize that his dad knew more than he had let on. Of course, Dad, they're real. What do you want to know? Because, my son, I had time to carefully go over all the original paperwork that Emily and I preserved in our safe. This time, the hush lasted longer. When David spoke again, his voice sounded completely different. There was no longer despair. Instead, there was something that looked like controlled dread. I don't know what you mean by it. It looks like you really get what I'm saying. Are you going to be honest and say so, or are you going to keep this up until the end? I don't understand what you're saying when you talk, Dad. If you want to talk to me, make your message clear. David's voice had a tinge of pride in it, which demonstrated that he still thought he could handle the situation. He kept attempting to keep to his story even though there was proof that I was telling the truth. Okay, David. I'll be honest with you. I took a deep breath before I delivered the words that would impact our relationship forever. I know you put your mom's name on the will when it wasn't real. I know you wrote a letter with a date after she died. I know you took the $4.7 million that was legally mine. After then, everything was eerily quiet. I could hear David's respiration getting all over the place. He was presumably trying to figure out what to do now that his scheme had been found out. That's a really severe accusation. Dad, it's not a charge, David. Experts have looked at the script, and a court order backs this up. Your problems aren't just random or the result of blunders made by the bank. The law states that will happen because of the offenses you committed. What offenses did I commit? David yelled 18 times. Are you out of your mind? I haven't done anything bad. Mom's will is okay. The will you handed me says that it will be valid on December 5, 2023. Your mother passed away on November 14, 2023. What does the difference in dates indicate this time? There was so much silence that I believed he had hung up. David eventually spoke, but he was considerably more angry and frightening this time. Dad, I don't know what you're up to, but this is too much. The times might have been off, but that doesn't change the essential premise. When she died, Mom wanted me to get her money. David, you did something wrong. Making a fake document that can be used as proof is a serious offense that can land you in jail for a long time. In jail. He had a harsh voice. Dad, this doesn't make any sense. I'm your kid. I didn't do anything that could get me in trouble with the law. You are no longer my child. I was even astonished by how frigid the words sounded when they came out of my mouth. My son would have remembered his mother with respect. My son, he would never have taken money from her grave. My son wouldn't have wanted me to die of hunger after I committed those horrible things. This is nuts. You're out of your mind. David, it's ridiculous to believe you could steal from me and hurt my feelings without getting detected. It's absurd to believe that your mom would be proud of you wasting her money on casinos and fancy things when she wants her husband to die of hunger. I didn't say that. Not at all. I hope you starve to death because you forgot to tell me that. Oh, Penniless, you poor old man. Because I can recall everything that was said. You could hear David start to breathe too fast. Listen up, Dad. Maybe. I might have done something wrong. I might have made quick decisions. But you can help me repair it. We can return the money. We can do that. There is no we in this case. A judge has already given David back the money. Your accounts have been frozen because they had money in them that didn't belong to you. You broke your flat lease since the rent was paid with stolen money. Your car was also towed for the same reason. You did it all. I showed the proof in court. The law took care of the rest. You are my father. Your responsibility is to protect me, not hurt me. The deceit in his comments made me angrier than I had been in weeks. To keep you safe, just like you did when you forged your mother's signature. Like how you protected me when you tried to kill me after taking my money. Please, Dad. I know I done something bad. But we can remedy this. You only have one boy. This can't happen. I can and I have. You should also know this. I took a moment to be ready for the last hit in this conversation. I have also completely removed you from my will, life insurance, and pension plan. David screamed like a wild beast, when I die, there will be no money left for you in my will. It was the sound of a man who had finally realized he had lost everything because he was greedy and cruel. You can't do that. I'm your kid. I have rights. You had rights. You lost them when you turned your back on your living and dead family. David hung up the phone fast, maybe because he didn't completely comprehend how serious the issue was. But I knew this was only the beginning. He had lost a lot of authority since he didn't give his dad enough credit. In the next 2 hours, he would see how much. David made a lot of urgent calls during the next 24 hours. They demonstrated that the artificial world he had built with his mother's stolen money was crumbling apart. My phone rang at 6 a.m. They couldn't stop for hours on Tuesday, April 29th. David implored his dad on the first call of the day, "Please change your mind." His voice sounded like he had been crying all night. "You can't ruin your only son's life over a misunderstanding. David, there is no misunderstanding. There are bogus papers and money that has been taken." One of his sons said he wanted his father was dead after watching him do those things. "I'm outside. Do you understand? They booted me out of the room since my credit card was denied. I slept on a seat in the municipal park." I should have felt bad for David because he had just posted photographs of himself sleeping outside and dining at locations that cost $500 a week before. I merely felt a frigid sense of pleasure that justice was finally being served. You should have thought about what would happen before you pretended to be your mother. The second call came in around 8 a.m. this time. David had a different idea. Using fear to get what you want. "I got a lawyer, Dad. He said that what you did was against the law. You can't freeze someone's money if they have a legal gift until the whole legal process is over." "Are you serious? Also, how did you pay this lawyer if all of your bank accounts are frozen?" There was a long gap when I asked. David clearly hadn't thought of that logical fallacy. "That doesn't matter. The law will punish you for this, David. That's what matters. You are the only one who will go to jail for forgery, serious fraud, and stealing an estate. My lawyer believes I might spend 3 to 6 years in jail." At 10 a.m., the third call came in. Demonstrated that David had begun to call other family members for aid or, more likely, to ask for money. "I talked to Uncle Raymond," he replied. Uncle Raymond is Emily's younger brother. After I told him everything, he agreed to aid me with money until we could figure out what to do. "Did you tell him that you stole his sister's money by using a phony name? I told you that there was a problem with some papers and that you were making things worse because you are sad." David used really devious tricks. He was desperate, yet he was still trying to control the story. He wanted me to look like an old guy in pain instead of the hurt father I truly was. David Raymond already knows the truth. Last night, I gave him images of all the evidence from the crime site. After a period of silence, my kid lost it and got incredibly angry, which revealed me who he truly was. "You are the son of A. How can you hurt your own blood? Your mom would be ashamed of you. Your mom would be ashamed of how much of a thief you are." The fourth phone came at midday, and this time David sounded truly frantic. "Dad, I haven't eaten anything since yesterday. I don't have any money with me. I just need some money to get by till we can figure this out. You bought cryptocurrencies for $800,000. What happened to that money? You lost $500,000. Where did the money go? Where is the money you wasted on extras while preparing to let me starve? That wasn't the same. It was my money. You took money from your dead mother's bank account by signing her name." The calls came in more often in the afternoon. 2, 3, and 4, each one more desperate than the previous and displaying more of David's cunning, manipulative side that he had been suppressing for years. At 5 p.m. he changed his mind again throughout the call and sought to jog Emily's memory. "This is not what Mom and Dad would have wanted. After she died, she probably would have wanted us to be a family. Your mom also wouldn't have appreciated it if you stole from me by pretending to be her. But you didn't give up. My mother cared for me. She knew I could handle the money better than you could. Why won't the real will let you in at all till after I die if she loved you so much?" The sixth call of the afternoon was cut short by something that sped things up a lot. The police called David to formally question him about the charges of document fraud. "Dad, 2 policemen came to find me. They told me I had to go to the station tomorrow to tell them what I knew about the charges against me. Did you do it?" I gave the court the information. The district attorney's office decided to press charges based on the facts. You can't put your own son in jail. David, you're not going to prison. The crimes you commit make you legally responsible. The eighth call came in around 8 p.m. was the saddest of them all. David couldn't stop crying anymore. "I'm sorry, Dad. I now know that I was mistaken. I know I did awful things, but I'm your only son. You can't just leave me like this." For the first time in days, I felt like a father. When I heard David cry, I thought of the boy I had held in my dreams and the teen I had hugged after a bad relationship. Then I remembered what he had said to me not long before. I hope you starve to death. Oh, Penniless, you poor old man. You could have been my son, David. You lost it when you planned to kill me and loot your deceased mother. I never wanted you to die. I was angry. I didn't get it. People say terrible things when they're angry. Good people don't want their parents to die, no matter how upset they are. The calls kept coming at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midnight, and 1 o'clock in the morning. There were more and more amusing phone calls. Each one reveals how a man lost everything because he was too hungry and his mind came apart totally. I started keeping track of the calls in the early morning. Before 6 in the morning. On April 30th, Wednesday, David called me 247 times in 24 hours. 247 begs for forgiveness from a man who went from being affluent off of stolen money to being poor in little than a week. The last call in that marathon of sadness came in at 6:15 a.m. It sounded like David had lost. He spoke in a voice that was barely a whisper. I can't do it anymore, Dad. I can't fight anymore because I'm too weak. You did it. It was never about beating or winning, David. It was about fairness and what would happen. What will happen now? The law will punish you for the crimes you did. You will get used to not having the money you took. You'll find out if you can become the guy your mother intended you to be or if you'll always be the crook you became. Will you ever forgive me? What you requested hit me like a blow in the stomach. For 42 years, I adored this man no matter what. But the man who stole my mother's money, used her identity to pretend she was dead, and wanted me to die was no longer my son. You don't get forgiveness by saying you're sorry, David, you get it by doing good things. And what you did shows what kind of person you are. When I hung up the phone, I realized the hardest part of my fight with David was over. In the following few hours, he would find out if he could learn from his mistakes or if he would keep going down the path of self-destruction he had chosen when he betrayed his family. Begging for forgiveness couldn't take away the terrible things he had spoken or the atrocities he had committed. They could also be the start of a true change that honors Emily's memory. Time would tell. On Thursday, May 1st, at 3 p.m., the doorbell rang loudly while I was reading the newspaper in the living room, where Emily used to cross-stitch. I knew who might be at my door because there were no guests planned and David had phoned 247 times in the last 48 hours. When I opened it, I saw my son do something I had never seen him do before. David had always been very particular about how he looked, but now he was messy, hadn't shaved, and was probably wearing the same wrinkled clothing for days. His eyes were red and puffy since he hadn't slept or sobbed in hours. Dad, he said in a weak voice. This was a tremendous shift from the week before, when he was so happy. Please let me in. We need to talk. I stood in the doorway for a few seconds and watched him. Even if the sad guy on my doorstep was my son, the 42-year-old David the first knew died for me the day he fabricated his mother's identity. I told her, if you want to talk, you can do it from there. You are not coming into the house you tried to steal from me. Dad, please. I know I made terrible mistakes. I know I let you down in the worst way possible. But I came here to confess everything. To explain exactly what I did and why. Now you want to confess after the forensic evidence proved your guilt after you lost all access to the stolen money. David literally collapsed, falling to his knees on my doorstep. I had never seen a grown man break so completely, and a primitive part of my paternal brain felt the urge to comfort him. But the image of Emily on her deathbed, trusting me to protect her memory, kept me firm. Dad, you're right about everything. I forged Mom's signature. I invented a fake will. I stole the money that legally belonged to you. Everything you discovered is true. His words, though expected, hit me with an unexpected emotional force. It was one thing to know intellectually that David had committed these crimes. It was another very different thing to hear him admit it with total clarity. And why did you do it? Explain to me how a 42-year-old man decides to rob his dead mother. David looked up and in his eyes I saw something I hadn't seen before. Genuine shame mixed with total desperation. I had debts, Dad. Gambling debts I didn't tell you about. I had been gambling for years, losing money I didn't have. When Mom died, I owed almost $200,000 to very dangerous people. Dangerous people. Loan sharks. People who don't accept excuses or payment plans. They told me if I didn't pay by Christmas, they were going to. They were going to hurt me badly. This revelation added a completely new dimension to David's betrayal. He hadn't just stolen out of greed. He had risked the family assets to save his own skin from the consequences of a gambling addiction he had hidden for years. So, you decided to rob your mother to pay your casino debts. At first, I thought I could get a loan using the inheritance as collateral, just temporarily, but when I reviewed Mom's real will and saw that she left everything to you, I panicked. And you decided to forge it. I met someone who specializes in documents. It cost me $20,000 to create the fake will with Mom's signature. I thought it would be easy that you were so affected by her death. You wouldn't check the details carefully. The calculated coldness of his plan disgusted me. He had used my grief over losing Emily as an opportunity to steal from me, counting on my vulnerable emotional state to protect him from scrutiny. And the rest of the money, the millions you squandered on luxuries and casinos after you stole. He lowered his head, unable to maintain eye contact. After paying my initial debts, there were over $4 million left. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Debt-free with money in the bank. I started spending because I could. The apartment, the car, the expensive dinners. It was like a drug and the $800,000 in cryptocurrency. I thought I could multiply the money quickly. I had seen videos on YouTube of people getting rich trading Bitcoin. I lost almost all of it in a week. And the $500,000 you lost in casinos after the crypto losses. I panicked. I thought I could win the money back by betting big on roulette and blackjack. Every loss made me bet more, trying to win back the last one. The stupidity of his financial decisions was astounding, but what outraged me most was the total lack of respect for the origin of the money. Every squandered dollar was an additional insult to Emily's memory. And when you decided to wish me to starve to death, was that also part of your panic? David covered his face with his hands and began to sob uncontrollably. Those words. My God, I can't believe I said that to you. I was desperate. I knew you had started to suspect, and I thought if I intimidated you enough, you would stop asking questions. You wished me dead, David, your own father, who had loved you unconditionally for 42 years. I know. And I am more ashamed of those words than anything else I've done. I would rather have stolen from 10 strangers than have said something so cruel to you. His tears seemed genuine, but the magnitude of his betrayal had created a chasm between us that I wasn't sure could ever be crossed. David, do you understand that what you did wasn't just stealing money from me? You desecrated your mother's memory. You forged her signature after her death. You used her grave as a business opportunity. Yes, I understand that. And I understand that you can probably never forgive me. What do you expect from this conversation? That I forgive you and restore your access to the money? That I drop the criminal charges? David wiped his tears and looked at me directly for the first time since he had arrived. I don't expect anything from you, Dad. I came here because I needed you to know the whole truth. Not just the facts you discovered through the legal investigation. I needed you to understand that although my actions were unforgivable, I never stopped loving you as a father. Did you love me when you forged my dead wife's signature? No. In those moments, fear and desperation had replaced everything else, including my love for you and my respect for Mom. And now that you've lost everything, the love has conveniently returned. The love never left completely, Dad. It was buried under layers of panic, greed, and stupidity. But being on the street these last few days, having nothing, facing the real possibility of prison, has made me remember what really matters. I remained silent for several minutes, observing this broken man, who was technically still my biological son, but who had become a stranger through his own decisions. David, what are you going to do now? How do you plan to live without the money you stole? I don't know, he admitted honestly. I guess I'll have to get a job. Something I haven't done in years because I always had access to your money or the stolen money. I'll have to learn to live like a normal person. And the criminal consequences? My public defender says that with the evidence you presented, I'll probably face between 2 and 4 years in prison. He says, if I cooperate fully and show genuine remorse, I might get a suspended sentence. The reality that my son might go to prison for his crimes against our family finally materialized completely in my mind. It was what I had sought with my lawsuit, but hearing it expressed so clearly produced a complex mixture of righteous satisfaction and paternal pain. David, I said finally, I want you to understand something very clearly. You can't have the money now. The real owner got it back, and the police are now keeping track of every dollar to make sure it all comes back. That can't be changed. I understand. I also want you to know that even though I appreciate your apologies, it doesn't erase what happened because of what you did. You have wounded our connection as father and son in a way that might not be possible to heal. David slowly agreed, and tears sprang to his eyes again. I understand, Dad. I only hope that someday, maybe years from now, you'll be able to forgive me enough to let me be the son you should have always been. After that chat, I closed the door behind us, which told me it was time to make a definitive decision concerning my friendship with David. David was a mess that night after he left my door. Emily made us chamomile tea when we had to make big decisions, and I sat in her study with a cup of it. The images of our life together on the shelf always looked at me and reminded me that everything I did should honor her memory and the values we had shared for 45 years. I spent hours thinking about what David said. Even though it was late, his thorough confession of guilt showed me things about him that I didn't know before. The man had been living two lives for years. He was hooked to video games, owing money to hazardous loan sharks, and planned his theft ahead of time. When I got up on Friday, May 2nd, it was gloomy and rainy. The sky seemed to be showing how I felt. James called me at 9 a.m. with news that would undoubtedly make the court procedure go faster. He spoke to Alan in a more serious tone than usual and said, I have important news about David's case. The district attorney's office has decided to speed up the case because David told the police what he did yesterday. Be honest with the police. He told me the truth yesterday at my place, but he didn't say anything about going to the police. It seems like he went to the station by himself after seeing you and told them the same thing he told you. He said that the paper was not real. The robbery of the estate and everything else. This news absolutely stunned me. After our conversation, David went out of his way to admit his offenses in front of everyone. He could have prevented this by getting a good lawyer to defend him. What does this signify for the court's rules? This indicates that the lawsuit will end much sooner. The DA is ready to come up with a sentence if there is a detailed statement and solid forensic evidence. David could spend 18 months in jail without the chance of parole, 5 years on probation, and he would have to pay back all the money. The court order, on the other hand, has already gotten the money back. Yes, that's right. As a punishment, David would have to pay an extra fine equal to 20% of the amount that was taken. In this scenario, almost $1 million. $1 million. How is he going to pay that much when he doesn't have any money? He will have to work for a long time and save some of his money to pay the state back. It's a step toward making the judicial system better. That afternoon, as I was getting all the paperwork ready to obtain Emily's estate back, someone came to see me. Raymond Hill, Emily's younger brother, knocked on my door. I recognized him right away since he seemed so serious. When I told Alan to come in, he said we needed to talk about David and what would happen to him now. Raymond was 61 years old and had known Emily since he was a child. As a retired school teacher, he always had a fair stance on family matters. Emily and I had made a lot of crucial decisions throughout the years based on what he thought. What are you thinking about, Raymond? I've been thinking about this whole issue since you handed me documentation of what David did as Emily's brother. I can't believe how disrespectful people are being to her memory. I also worry for David because I am his uncle. David will have to cope with what he did. That's what Emily wanted. I agree with all you said. But I also think Emily would have wanted us to give him an opportunity to make things right, as long as it was sincere and he had to work hard to do it. Raymond's statements truly struck me because they made me think of a moral issue that Emily and I used to speak about. She always thought that people should have second chances, but only if they really changed their behavior and not just their words. What do you really want to do? I'm not saying you should give him the money back or dismiss the charges. I think you should think about getting back together with him on a basic basis when he completes his sentence and shows that he has changed for at least 2 years. Raymond, David forged your late sister's signature, took millions from me, and told me he hoped I would die of hunger. I know you can't get away with what you did, but I also know that Emily loved David a lot, and she would be incredibly sad if she found out that her family would never be the same again because of what he did. We talked about everything that was going on for the next 2 hours. Raymond didn't agree with what David did, and he didn't try to make his misdeeds seem less horrible. But he did remark that David should get the whole sentence and maybe even be allowed to change. This might make it possible for some people to get back together in the future. I got a call on Saturday, May 3rd, that changed how I felt about David's odds of being saved. Mr. Miller, my name is Charles Vaughn, and I'm the director of the Summit Recovery Center, the head of a rehab center for gambling addicts on the outskirts of Chicago, said to me. Your son David came here yesterday on his own and asked to be admitted to our residential rehabilitation program. Yes, it is a very intense 6-month program for people who are seriously addicted to gaming. David told us about all of his legal and money troubles and wanted us to place him in the hardest program we offer. He also wanted to know how he could pay for that care if he didn't have any money. That was the precise reason I called. David asked us to get in touch with you to see whether you could pay for the therapy. The complete training costs $12,000. This request put me in a very tough spot. David was implicitly asking me to pay for his rehab, which I thought was another method for him to get money from me. But it might also be true indication that he realized what was wrong and wanted to repair it before it ruined everything. Mr. Vaughn, I need to think about what you want. Can you tell me more about what this training covers? Of course. Clients stay at our center for 6 months as part of the private program. It includes daily individual and group therapy, learning about money, getting back to work, and mental follow-up. It also includes family therapy to help people get their relationships back on track after the drug hurt them. A therapist for families. We do help family members who have been injured by the addict's actions, though. David made it obvious that he wanted to include meetings where he could work on addressing the problems he had caused you. That night, when I went through Emily's rose garden, I had to make the hardest decision of my life. Should I pay for David's therapy so he can prove that he genuinely is sorry for what he did? Or would they just be trying to get me to give them money by making me feel guilty and hopeful? I didn't sleep much the night before, but on Sunday, May 4th, I made a decision that would impact my relationship with David forever. I called the rehab center and talked to Charles Vaughn. Mr. Vaughn, I'm willing to pay for David's medical care as long as certain conditions are met. What are the terms, Mr. Miller? The first rule is that David has to continue in the program for the whole 6 months and not drop out. If he leaves before I'm done, I won't help him again. I understand. In the second scenario, David can't get in touch with me at all during those 6 months. No one else will be able to call, email, or write you notes. I don't want him to get better because he wants to get back together with me. Those rules are pretty strict. The third criterion is that you must give me a detailed report on his progress, his true desire to change, and his real probability of being rehabilitated by the end of the program. After that, I'll consider about how little touch there might be. If he successfully completes the program, demonstrates actual improvement for 6 months without contacting me, and you think he is really rehabilitating, I might allow us talk once to determine if there is any reason for a very limited future relationship. Hey there, Mr. Miller. These circumstances are quite hard, but I think they might be just what David needs to prove that he really is remorseful. When I hung up the phone, I knew I had made a choice that Emily would have liked. David wasn't getting a free ride. I gave him a second chance by asking him to work hard, give up things, and show that he had changed. If he failed, he would have shown that he was clever in a bad way, and they would never be able to get along again. If he succeeded, it would signal the start of a very limited and constrained friendship that was fair and kind. David was now in charge of our connection as father and son. David and I didn't talk for the following 18 months, which was what I had agreed to do to help him get better. My schedule was very different back then because Emily and David weren't in my life at all. For decades, they had been the most significant individuals in my life. In July 2024, I got a legal notice saying that David had been given a sentence of 18 months of jail time and 5 years of probation. He was handed a sentence that included paying the state a $1 million fine. For 15 years, this would be taken out of his paychecks. During those months of solitude, I made habits that helped me remember who I was as an independent man. Emily had always urged me to attempt drawing, so I started taking courses every Tuesday morning. I joined a book club that met every Thursday afternoon to chat about great American works. Every Saturday morning, I helped out at a soup kitchen organized by Chicago charities. Beginning in September, the rehab clinic emailed me monthly updates on David's development. As we had talked about, Charles Vaughn sent me professional reports that indicated how my son had evolved over time. He didn't give me any personal information that could have harmed my feelings. September 20124. The first month of the patient's life proceeded well. He is quite involved in both group and one-on-one therapy. He has been taking classes to learn about money and how to control his urges. In October 2024. The patient has gotten much better at seeing hazardous patterns. At the center, he has begun doing work for the neighborhood. You can't try to get in touch with people outside the group without authorization. In November 2024. The patient has gotten a certificate in basic woodworking as part of their job recovery. He keeps showing that he is really dedicated to the task. Psychological testing suggests that obsessive habits have gotten a lot better. In February 2025, exactly 1 year after this horror started, I did something I would never have dreamt of doing a few months earlier. I officially started the Emily Miller Foundation for Pancreatic Cancer Research. I gave $2 million of my own money to this foundation, which made it one of the most important private institutions in the country that fights diseases like the one that killed Emily. The foundation would help families who have been affected, fund medical research, and pay tribute to Emily in a way that she would have been proud of. At the launch ceremony, which was held at the hospital where Emily had been treated, I talked about why I wanted to form the foundation. In her last months, my wife Emily Miller fought pancreatic cancer with honor and fortitude that made me proud. The only thing she really left behind was the hope that no other family will have to face with this cancer without the tools they need to combat it. I didn't mention about David in my speech, but I could sense and hear his grief in every word. I used the things he had tried to steal for a completely different reason to remember Emily. In April 2025, I got the most significant news from the treatment center. April 2025. The patient has finished the program after 8 months of hard labor. He has licenses to operate as an electrician and a woodworker. He started getting paid to work in the facility, and he gives half of his earnings to the state fine fund. There are no indicators of too much gaming in the psychological examinations. We think you should ponder about the end of the event. 2 days before the anniversary of the first time David and I fought, I got the call from Charles Vaughn that I had been waiting for months. Mr. Miller, Daniel has concluded the 6-month home program. He has done everything that was expected of him and proved that he can really make things better. What do you think as a professional about how probable it is that he will stick with these changes? David is one of the top 5% of patients who have changed the most sincerely and honestly in the 20 years I've been running this facility. He hasn't altered his mind about it in half a year. He has learned how to do a real job and has spent a lot of time working on problems with his family. Has he told me what he wants from us to get back together? One of the best things about how he works is that he has never expressed that he wants to make things right with someone or ask for forgiveness. He has put a lot of effort into becoming better, but he knows that it might not fix his relationship with his family. What do you think should happen next? I think you should ponder about the one talk you brought up in your first post. David has earned that chance, but you still have to determine if you want to date someone in the future. I ate dinner by myself in the kitchen that night, where Emily used to try out new Mediterranean cuisine. It made me think about how my life has evolved in the last year and a half. I went from being a weak widower whose son had taken him to being an independent man who had restored his honor, left his wife a meaningful legacy, and made sure that family treachery had serious ramifications. Professionals say that David went from being a manipulative addict who faked papers and wanted his father to die to a man who worked hard to pay his debts and was all right with the possibility of living without getting along with his family again. Today, Thursday, May 15, 2025, is exactly 1 year after David began his rehabilitation. I made the decision to keep my word. It was fine for me to meet Charles Vaughn at the treatment center while someone else was watching. The conversation will take no more than 2 hours. I told David that he could say what he needed to say, and I would figure out if there was any justification for very minimal touch in the future. I understand perfectly. Mr. Miller, are there any specific things that need to happen at this meeting? Yes. David needs to realize that this talk doesn't make any promises. That doesn't mean you won't get in trouble again. It doesn't give back any money rights. And it doesn't promise a future relationship. It's merely a chance for him to prove that he has changed. I will tell him exactly what you said. When I hung up the phone, I realized I was going to have the hardest and most crucial talk of my life. I hadn't seen David in a year and a half. I had altered who I was, honored Emily's legacy, and found meaning in helping other families with cancer. Now the question was whether David had actually evolved in those 18 months into the man his mother would have wanted him to be, or if he had merely learned how to trick the system to gain this chance. In 3 days, I would finally know the answer. At 10 in the morning on the 18th of May, 2025. I got to the Summit Recovery Center just in time for the meeting that would tell me if David had really changed or if he had just learned how to trick people better over 18 months of forced recovery. When I walked into Charles Vaughn's office, he gave me the respect I deserved. Over the past few months, we've created a professional relationship based on doctor reports and fair evaluations. But before we spoke, today would be the first time I would see the concrete consequences of Mr. Miller's work with David. You should know that David has been thoroughly informed about the rules of this meeting. He realizes there are no guarantees, that you haven't promised anything, and that this might be his only chance to talk to you. What did he do when that happened? He told me without any hesitation that he was just grateful for the chance to show you how much he had changed, even if it didn't mean they would be together in the future. Charles took me to a tiny meeting room with windows that looked out over the garden at the center. There were awards on the walls from prior patients who had completed the program. These were tangible reminders that those who were willing to fight for it could really get better. When David arrived into the room, it took me a few seconds to really recognize him. The man who came to my door 18 months ago, grubby and in need, had been replaced by someone who was cool and elegant in a way I hadn't seen in years. David had dropped weight in a healthy way, which meant he was eating well and exercising out a lot. He had a good haircut. He dressed clean, plain clothes for labor, and the scars on his hands revealed that he had been doing actual work. But what really grabbed out was how calm his expression was. It didn't exhibit any of the cockiness or fake desperation he had shown when he fell. He only said "Dad" and didn't try to embrace or touch her. "Thank you for giving me this chance, David." I also answered in a formal and distant way. "You have 2 hours to show me that you really have changed or that you have just learned how to act better." He sat down in front of me and put his hands on the table. We were quiet and looked at each other for a time. It was like assessing each other after being apart for a period, which had affected us both in significant ways. "Dad, I've had a lot of time to think about all the horrible things I did, the mean things I said, and how I broke all the rules you and my mom taught me over the last 42 years. Go on. I want to talk about something more essential before I say I'm sorry. You should realize that these 18 months have made me a different person." Then David told me all about his time in rehab, but not in the way I assumed he would, by talking about how terrific he was. Instead, he thought about the precise skills he had learned, the effort he had done, and the ways he had really transformed the way he thought and acted. "For the past 8 months, I've been a licensed builder and electrician. I earn $1,200 a month by fixing and creating stuff. The state receives the $600 to pay the fine they gave you. I use the other $600 to pay for stuff I need every day." "What city do you live in?" "In a shared room at a residence for persons who are attempting to get back to work. Rent costs me $300 a month, food costs $200, and getting about and other small stuff costs $100. What do you like to do when you have free time?" "I go to Gamblers Anonymous sessions 3 times a week. I studied books about how to handle money and how to comprehend addiction. On the weekends, I help out at a soup kitchen for those who are underprivileged." This statement really got to me since it was so different from how David had lived his whole adult life. For the first time, he was surviving on a tiny amount of money, working with his hands, and giving back to his community without taking advantage of other people. "David, why did you decide to aid individuals who are poor?" I knew what it was like to be completely homeless since I had to sleep in parks and train stops as I was falling apart. I wanted to help individuals who were in that situation, and I kept asking myself, where does self-destruction lead? What have you learned about yourself through this process? David took a deep breath before he spoke, as if he had been getting ready for months. "For a long time, I've known that. My whole life, I had been lying about who I was and what I deserved. When I was a kid, I imagined I would get the family money someday. That's why I never truly learned how to work hard or get good at anything. When I really needed money, I stole instead of working. Now I know that every dollar I make from working is worth more than all the millions I stole because I worked for it. For the first time in my life, I'm proud of how I make money." David displayed a level of self-reflection and behavior improvement during the next 2 hours that was much greater than I had imagined. He didn't try to make his offenses seem less serious or make excuses for what he had done in the past. Instead, he proved that he really understood how his actions had affected not just my life, but also Emily's memory and the idea of family religion. Dad, I have something essential to tell you about Mom. What? I spent a lot of time in therapy trying to find out how what I did impacted her memories. She didn't simply steal things, she also fabricated her name. That was against all she believed in. Mom valued honesty above all else, and when she died, I took it as an opportunity to perform the most dishonest thing I've ever done. What he stated made it plain that he knew how wrong his actions were, which we hadn't heard since we first met. What have you done to keep her in your mind while you were getting better? I send $50 of my paycheck to the Emily Miller Foundation that you started every month. I only have that much money right now, but I want to do something nice to keep her memory alive. This revelation stunned me to my core. David had been following what the foundation was doing and had figured out how to help without getting in touch with me personally, which was in line with our agreement not to talk to one another. What do you want to get out of this talk, David? You can tell me what kind of relationship you believe we could have. I don't expect anything. If you decide after this talk that you don't want to talk to me again, that's fine with me. You have been more patient and fair with me than I deserve by giving me this chance. But what do you actually want to happen? I would like to have very little contact with you, maybe once a year, not to fix our father-son connection since I know that trust is gone forever, but so you can see that I am still living responsibly. Charles Vaughn came back to the meeting after 2 hours to conclude it. David stood up and looked me in the eye one last time. Then he said something that I would remember for months. Dad, it doesn't matter what you choose. These past 18 months have shown me how to be the kind of guy my mom would have wanted me to be, even if we never see each other again. At least when I die, I'll know that I finally accomplished something to honor her memory instead of putting it down. I was positive I had witnessed a substantial shift when I left the treatment center that afternoon. David had not only exhibited real remorse, but he had also changed his behavior for the better and become a good member of society. After 2 weeks, I made a choice that Emily would have loved. I informed David that we could only talk about some things every 6 months as long as he maintained working hard and becoming better. It wasn't the end of my dad's anger or the beginning of a new friendship. It meant accepting that individuals can change and that fairness must entail giving them a chance to be forgiven if they really deserve it. The group that was named after Emily and supported families with cancer will always have her money. David would keep paying the state what he owed for the following 14 years. We would keep living on our own and doing good things instead of being mad all the time to honor Emily's spirit. We had found a way to live together that was fair and caring, just like Emily would have taught us. She could have helped us get through this family tragedy that almost killed us all if she were still living. If you appreciate this narrative, please see the movie and leave a comment to let us know what you think. To hear the next tale, click the box on the left. Thanks for looking.